Greetings, fellow adventurers. I'm Max with Peak D&D.
And I'm Ben. Welcome to the Peak.
We're here in the Rocky Mountains helping you elevate your game in 5th edition D&D and life.
In this episode of Peaked Interest, we're talking about making your games of Dungeons & Dragons as fun as possible.
So, let's roll some initiative and get to it.
Now, even though we're only a level 1 channel, there's a compliment that we continue to get over and over again.
What the f***? Can't believe it. You. I don't this mistress. What the shit? Hasn't anyone ever told you it's rude to sneak up on a unicorn in its grove while it's enjoying its favorite podcast? Come to think of it, that's not even supposed to be possible. Who are you? Why are you here? What business do you have with Saint Gumdrop, Lollipop, Snugglyface, Tiny Pants? What? Yes, of course I have every right to use that title. I am a lawful good divine being, for Cuthbert's sake. I couldn't lie about that if I wanted to. What? No. Quite easy, really. I simply submitted the appropriate number of topics to Ignorant and Uninformed, and one day, a totally legit and valid certificate of sainthood magically appeared in my grove. Now be gone! Jeff was just starting to talk about how much he loves Omega!
Come on, man. Seriously?
I know. But we get it over and over again, and it's, you guys always look like you're having so much fun.
Which is awesome because really, we are. And it's pretty rad that it shows through on camera.
But it got us thinking. Since our goal as a channel is to help you elevate your game, maybe we should talk about it.
So this week, it's all about the fun. Specifically, how to have more of it.
After pooling together for a meeting of the minds, shout out Tony and Nick, we realized that there are a handful of things that we do, and so can you, to make this happen.
Broadly speaking, there are 2 pillars that serve as the foundation for our house of fun, our funhouse.
Most everything that we as a group do to make our sessions as fun as possible belongs in one of 2 categories: creating a sacred space, and yes, and.
When Ben and I say creating a sacred space, we don't mean that you need to have a dedicated physical location solely reserved for D&D.
And we don't mean that you need to play organ music or use singing bowls or be like Max and burn sage before each session.
I'm a hippie at heart. What can I say?
What we mean is treating the game of Dungeons & Dragons and the idea of having fun with it with a bit of reverence.
The space you need to create is more internal than external. It's space in your life, in yourself, and in your characters.
First, creating space in your life.
Anyone who's ever played D&D knows there's prep work that goes into playing it.
Most people are content to let it all fall to the Dungeon Master, seeing as they are the person who runs the game.
But the truth is, there's more fun to be had at the table if everyone, players and DM alike, make the time to prepare.
For players, this means spending time with your character.
This is something that each of us does before sitting down for a session. What's funny is it's not like any of us suggested that we should do this, it just happened.
It doesn't have to be a long time, and you don't need to get into some crazy method acting exercise to examine who is Jastian.
Not at all. Just a few minutes really to review your character and any notes about where you left off in the story.
For me, I reacquaint myself with my character sheet and Jastian and then replay the previous session in my head movies, kinda like we do on Talking Fae, minus the clock.
So like, oh, I'm a warlock, I'm a smarmy warlock who spent all of daddy's money and talks his way out of everything. Sad childhood, bird lasers, pew pew, pew pew.
Yeah, that about covers it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
For me, I've got a couple blurbs, a backstory, and a few quotes that I like to read to help me get into Illinsworth's mind.
Tony repeats in Gord's accent whatever root vegetable quips sprout up during his week and reminds himself that he's a naive country boy who loves ham.
Now for Nick, as he is our master of dungeons, this process is similar but different.
Instead of taking a moment to get into his character, Nick takes a minute to get into the story.
If he's running a module like Into the Fae, order your copy today, that means rereading the part he's about to run. If he's off book, then it's thinking through where his players are and how they got there.
all the while with an eye on the next story beat the group is likely to take and where he wants them when the session ends.
So all of us carve out time to spend in the story before we sit down to play, and doing so allows us to be more present when we do.
It's really hard to be engaged in what's happening in front of you if your mind is wandering or lost trying to make sense of what's happening in front of you.
As ironic as it sounds, the more preparation you do, the more spontaneous and authentic you can be to your character and the story.
So having fun means doing a homework?
I guess.
Nerd! The second type of space that we create in order to promote fun at our table is emotional.
My emotions! My emotions!
Look, we're all people. Life is hard and work sucks and bosses can bitch and spouses and partners and kids get sick and people die.
Any one of these, and a whole shitload more, can take up that valuable mental real estate that you need to build your funhouse.
Creating some emotional space before you sit down to play can look like talking with a loved one, or taking a minute to journal, or even just saying what you're feeling out loud to yourself.
Now, Max will tell you there have been plenty of times that I've come in and just needed to decompress before I break out my dice to play.
Yeah, it's true. And Ben, we're happy to do it, man. Now, this might not be appropriate for you or your group, so it's up to you to find a way that is.
Yeah, please don't try to multi-class your party. Not every D&D group needs to take a level in therapist.
Just find a way to leave your day before you play.
The more you know.
The last type of space involves your character, if you're a player, and the module/game you're running as a DM.
Players, make a fun character. Having a character you enjoy playing makes having fun while playing way easier.
There's a line I've heard before, attributed to Dale Carnegie, that's something like, if you want to be interesting, be interested.
Be interested in your character, and your character will be interesting. A game full of interesting characters will be more fun.
Or, if you're the DM, pick a module, tell a story you're interested in, because if you, the Dungeon Master, is bored, then your game is gonna be boring.
Your character brings us to the other major structural support of this, our funhouse. It's yes and.
Peak D&D is fortunate. Half of us, Ben and Nick, work in theater and have studied improv.
Funny story. The way I got into improv was, the story about me getting into improv was...
Yes and is the golden rule of improv. It's a commandment to be additive, generative, and collaborative. It's the answer to every question.
My God, is that a dog running across the screen?
Yes, and have you ever seen one so big or that color?
Well, I mean, only once, but I was in Prague.
Prague, you say? I have a cousin in Prague. We call him Czech Charlie.
See? Neither of us contradicted anything the other said. We accepted what they offered and then added to it, each time setting up the other person.
While sure, yes and is a great tool to promote creativity and fun during in-game conversations between characters, there are some broader implications.
Yes, 100%. Good players yes and the story. Good DMs yes and the players.
Absolutely. Playing a collaborative storytelling game means being creative and working together.
For players, yes-anding the story starts in character creation. Make a character for the story you're playing, and you'll have more fun playing the story.
Take Jastian, for example. I knew I wanted to play a warlock, and I knew we were playing a module called Into the Fae.
At first level, warlocks choose a patron. There are 8 different ones Ben could have gone with. Any of them probably would have been cool and fun.
But there's an obvious yes and for a story called Into the Fae. Choosing Archfey as a patron, I took a step toward the story and gave Nick an additional point of contact between it and my character.
Tony did the same thing when he opted for Oath of the Ancients as his archetype in 3rd level.
Again, he had 8 options to choose from, all of which could have worked, but one stood a hair above the rest for telling the story Into the Fae.
The second sentence of the description of Oath of Ancients says, these paladins are sometimes called Fey Knights.
Tony and I both bent our choices to the story we were in, instead of forcing the story and Nick to bend to us.
This is how we, or they at least, have yes-anded the story.
Well, you chose to be from Airedale, the setting of the campaign. You could have literally been from anywhere else in the world.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
But as we said, it's not just the players who yes-and. The DMs can too.
Yes, and they sure can. It's something Nick is an expert at. He goes out of his way to yes-and his players with his knots.
Ooh, Nick's knots. I like it.
Huh?
Knots are what we call Nick's patented additional backstories. At the start of every campaign he runs, he gives his players a choice of a number of different knots.
Knots don't usually come with any sort of numeric advantage, but they serve as an additional point of connection to the narrative.
They are a way to make the characters care and have emotional stakes in the outcome by tying them in to the fabric of the story.
A knot also acts as a compass of sorts and helps us as players orient ourselves and our actions.
No doubt, I chose my affiliation with the Honeygut Dwarves, you chose to be a delinquent, and Tony is a soothsayer of hell.
This meant that we were already woven into the fabric of the story and didn't have to spend a second thinking about how we were gonna fit in, or forcing Nick to figure that out for us.
Another way that DMs can yes-and their players and the story has to do with the way they plan.
In Nick's words, which he freely admitted were borrowed but couldn't remember from whom,
Eisenhower.
Plans are useless. Planning is indispensable.
Understanding where the players are, the events unbeknownst to them taking shape around them, and having a sense of the direction you'd like them to go is important.
But having how they get there meticulously mapped out and perfectly plotted, and being attached to it going that precise way, is always a recipe for disaster.
DMs, we, your players, will never know your plan and therefore can never be relied on to follow it.
There's a reason it's called playing and not following the plan of Dungeons & Dragons. It's a game. You play it. Part of the fun lies in the exploration and the unexpected.
Now, for players, these come easy. Exploration is our job, and we don't know what's gonna happen.
Obviously, this isn't the case for DMs. Their job is to know what's around every corner, down every passage, and behind every dreaded nothing seems to happen.
Really, the only thing DMs don't know is what their players are going to do, though they probably have a guess.
Keeping the how of things open is one of the few ways that DMs get to engage with the exploration and unexpected parts of Dungeons & Dragons.
So DMs, don't rob yourself of this aspect of the game. Do your planning, but let go of your plan.
Something else that we do as players to yes-and the story happens at the end of our sessions too.
Unless we're at a very obvious point in the story, starting or in the middle of a dungeon, let's say, we give Nick a heads up.
Now, it's nothing huge or elaborate, but it's usually a sentence or two to give him an idea of our trajectory for the next session.
This saves him the frustration of spending a bunch of time preparing something in the opposite direction of where we're gonna go.
Which in turn saves us from having a very pissed off DM behind the screens.
No one wants that.
Oh no. And another way that we like to yes-and the story and the fun around the table, we crack jokes.
It doesn't matter how bad or groan-worthy they are. Be the person who cracks the first joke. Guffaws, groans, it sets the tone and says, hey, we're here to have fun.
That might be the most important point. Dungeons & Dragons is supposed to be fun. Show up with that attitude, expect it to be, and take an active stance to make it that way.
There's a misconception that fun is passive, that it's great and we like having it, but it's something done to us.
But that's not how it works. Fun, like happiness or meaning, isn't something you just get one day. It's something you make along the way.
These are the things that we do on both sides of the screen, the blueprints and building materials, if you will, that we bring and use to make our funhouse.
But at the end of the day, and this is something we haven't yet touched on, we're all of a like mind.
Ben is totally right. There are tons of different ways to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Some people take it extremely seriously. Some groups are all about accents in character. Some folks are only into it if they can be in the spotlight.
Others show up for the snacks, or just to socialize because they like the people but have zero interest in the story.
Is this right? Is it wrong? I don't know. And even if I did, it's not my place to say how you should play.
There isn't a right or a wrong way to play Dungeons and Dragons. Now, there very well may be a right or wrong way that you like to play.
Finding a group that plays the way you like to play goes a long way towards having fun around the table.
Stay away from groups who play in ways you don't care for.
The chances that you're going to have fun sitting around the table engaged in something you hate are about this big.
Yeah, we don't play games to not have fun. That defeats the whole purpose.
Max and I have given you some insight into the way that we like to play and what we do to make Dungeons and Dragons as fun as it can possibly be.
Everything that we've talked about are things that you can do or adapt to suit you and your group.
And P.S., if you go back and rewatch this video, anytime we say Dungeons and Dragons, just replace it with life and see what that does to your outlook.
Hey, thanks for sticking around and hanging out with us today.
Hopefully, we piqued your interests.
Gave you something to think about, help you elevate your game.
Let us know in the comments the tricks that you like to use to have fun around your gaming table.
Is there a topic you'd like us to cover? Cast ending.
There's an email link in the description, blue.
Like what we do here? Roll to hit that subscribe button. Each one of you who does, thank you. You have brought us one step closer to leveling up.
Make sure to drop the wardings around that notification bell so you don't get skipped and miss your turn.
Check back here every Wednesday and Saturday for more Dungeons & Dragons videos.
And support the channel by casting Big B's thumbs up and liking this video. That works too. Until then, adventurers, keep on a-climbing.
And we'll catch you next time up here at the peak.
It sound right, boy.
No, man, I'm good. I'm good, bro. I'm good. I got one more in me. But I realized, I'm like, man, why am I always so achy after these? It's because I'm standing on a block of wood. Movie stars do it all the time, okay? Everyone just chill.
Just wait till
honest do I want to be with everybody?
Backstories.
Left out the channel part. All together.
Hey, man.
All together now.
All together now.